This is In-Ear Insights, the Trust Insights podcast. Do you want to use AI in your marketing, but you're not sure where to start? Take a class with Trust Insights and the Marketing AI Institute. The AI Academy offers more than 25 classes and certification courses to start you on your AI journey, including our Intelligent Attribution Modeling for Marketers certification. One membership gets you access to all 25 classes. Visit trustinsights.ai/AI Academy to learn more and enroll today. That's trustinsights.ai/AI Academy to enroll today. Are you struggling to reach the right audiences? Trust Insights offers sponsorships in our newsletters, podcasts, and media properties to help your brand be seen and heard by the right people. Our media properties reach almost 100,000 people every week, from the In-Ear Insights podcast to the Almost Timely and In the Headlights newsletters. Reach out to us today at trustinsights.ai/contact to learn more. Again, that's trustinsights.ai/contact. In this week's In-Ear Insights, we're talking about convenience and the way that some companies are able to provide value in ways that at first seem like, well, that seems like, why wouldn't you do that yourself? You know, it's the version of, why would you go to a restaurant when you can cook the same thing at home for a substantially less money? The example we're talking about is, we saw the software company that sells public data in an API to companies that want to bring in public data. And when I first saw that, I said, well, why would you need to do that? It's trivial to bring in data from like the US Federal Reserve Bank or data.gov or any of these credible sources, and it's already free. Why would I pay $400 a month or more to do exactly the same thing? So Katie, why would we do that?
Well, some of it comes down to time, some of it comes down to skill set, and some of it comes down to, I just want someone to do it for me. So in the example of the restaurant, you know, if you're, pressed for time or you can't cook, you then, getting takeout and going to restaurants is probably part of your routine, as opposed to buying food and making it yourself. So you replace those costs of buying groceries with buying pre-made food already. When we were talking about this last week, I was giving the example of, the fruit cut up at the grocery store. So, you can buy a whole watermelon for a couple of dollars, or you can buy a very small portion of the watermelon, but it's already been seeded and cut up and portioned for you, but it's more expensive because someone else has already done the work. And for a lot of people, that pre-portioned, already having the work done is more attractive, because then they don't have to think about it. The same is true for, think about the things around your house. I could get up on a ladder and try to clean my gutters myself, or I can pay someone, $100 to clean out my gutters better than I can do it. And so there's this give and take with this, market of convenience. Now, some of the stuff really does come down to, I don't have the skills or I don't have the time. And then some of it comes down to, I just don't want to. I don't want to clean my gutters. I'm happy to pay someone else to clean my gutters so that I don't have to deal with it. And I think when we're talking about, services within marketing and data analytics, prepackaged data is an attractive thing to people, because they don't have to deal with trying to figure out, how do I connect an API? What is an API? Where do I bring it? How do I clean it? Where do I get it? Do I know how to use it? Like, just give me the data, tell me what it says, and then I can go about my merry way. But I feel like, Chris, because you are such a do-it-yourselfer, you probably have a difference of opinion on this.
I do, particularly since this company offers an API, which is what you're buying. It's like, so you could not spend $400 a month and still do the same amount of coding that you're going to have to do to connect to this company's API. I think the value of what they're offering theoretically is that the data itself is supposedly vetted, but it is all public available data from different governments. The same way that a lot of people pay subscriptions to Statista instead of Googling for a minute and a half to find the actual underlying data source. And so the challenge I run into is not so much the existence of it, it's the value prop. What is the value of spending $400 a month to get data that's already free in a format that is not necessarily prepackaged any better than the original data? But why how much time does that save you? Like, does it really save you that much time? I guess if you're really bad at Googling, then that it would save you some time. But to me, it's like I don't see the time savings there. There's some things that for sure I see the time savings for, and like you said, it always comes down to time, money, and skill, right? Which of those do you have the least of? Tells you what you're going to have to do. If you've got skill and you got time and you don't have money, then yeah, you're going to be making it. It's going to be all DIY all day, right? And on the other hand, if you have no time and you have no skill, but you got a ton of money, everything in your life is prepackaged. Somebody probably comes in and makes your bed for you, and that's okay, right? There's a place for that. There's definitely a market for that. But where I question is, especially in today's environment, what is the return on investment of something that's that expensive? Like if that was $9 a month, like, okay, $9 a month, so I can code to one API instead of five. I can see that time savings pretty quickly. But $400 a month, I don't see the savings there.
Do you think that perhaps it's a misunderstanding of how much work you have to do yourself versus that return on investment? And so the example that you're giving, Chris, is this company who is quote unquote pre-packaging data sets, but really there's still a lot of setup and developer time needed in order to access these data sources, which is relatively the same as you just doing it, yourself and getting these free. It sounds to me like there's perhaps a misunderstanding with this particular company, what they're selling, what they're giving access to, and how much work you have to do yourself. Do you see the value in, if this company were to say, you know what, we will, for that $400 a month, we will also set up the API, do the coding for you, and basically all you have to do is show up and the data is presented to you in a usable format?
I could definitely see the value in that. Yeah, if it was literally, what's the B2B cliche? It's literally a turnkey solution, and it really was, then yes, because that saves time. The other thing that they could do that we didn't see in their marketing, but would be a significant value add, would be these data sets have been cleaned. Because we know government data sets have all sorts of anomalies in them. The Medicare data set's a really good example. The hospital quality data set, 30% of it's missing because various
It's self-report.
It's self-reporting. Especially in today's environment, this data set has been validated for bias, or has the provenance and the lineage of the data set has been verified. Like we know this is good data. We know this data is free of obvious biases, both statistical and human. Those are the things where suddenly $400 a month starts to make a lot more sense, because if you can say, hey, I'm going to build a machine learning model on this thing and I need to be able to show an auditor, yep, I checked the data set. If you don't have training in detecting statistical bias, but you can buy from a verified vendor, then yeah, you've basically handed the blame off to somebody else.
So let's walk through some of the things that are of value in this, I'm calling it this convenience market segment. And so these are services done for you that if you had the time, you could do yourself, or if you had the skill, you could do yourself. But the reason people seek these things out is because they don't have the time, or they don't have the skill, or they just don't want to do it. One of the things that we do, Chris, at Trust Insights is we will set up somebody's Google Analytics account for them using best practices, and then make sure all their tags are connected so that they can collect the proper data. And this is something that we always kind of go back and forth of, where why can't somebody do this themselves versus we're happy to do this for them because it keeps us in business. What are some of those things that are good return on investment and fit into that convenience market?
It's funny you bring that up, because that's something that I wrestle with all the time, which is, what's the value of it, right? I was thinking about that last night while I was shoveling mulch. Like, what is the value of Google Analytics, right? By itself, it doesn't really have any value. It's just a pile of data. And so setting it up correctly is theoretically important, but only if you're doing something with the data. One of the things that we say all the time is data without decisions is a distraction. If you just collect data and you're obsessing about the data and you're not actually making any decisions with it, you're wasting time and money. Where the value is for all of this stuff, including the convenience stuff, is, does it get you to better decisions faster? right? So if you have a good Google Analytics setup and a good Google Tag Manager setup, and you're bringing in the data and you're running an attribution model, and you figure out sooner rather than later that you're wasting your budget on Facebook, right? That's a decision you can make that has benefit. Like you could say a week into a campaign, that sure looks like Facebook's giving us no real return on investment because we're pouring $10,000 a day into it and we're getting 5 leads, right? That's an easy decision to make. Like, okay, let's put that spend somewhere else. So when we offer those services, in some ways, that those are like prerequisite services to actually getting the value out of the data itself. And could you get the value, that data value, somewhere else? Maybe, but Google Analytics is pretty thorough, which is one of the reasons why most of the planet uses it. Where I see a role for all kinds of companies, including ours, is making that data valuable, like turning it into decisions. Like, okay, we're going to look at this with you and say, this is what you need to do more of. This is what you need to do less of. This looks like an opportunity for you. This looks like it could be a problem for you. One of the reasons why we see things like SEO and social media analytics and stuff continue to be prominent in marketing is because there's a lot of data. People can't make good value out of it, and they don't know what to do. When you hand somebody your standard SEO report out of an SEO tool, their eyes just get really big, like, what do I do? As opposed to when you hand somebody, a boiled down report, it's like, fix these 5 pages. Like, got it.
So it sounds like you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that a lot of these off-the-shelf software tools that are meant to make your life easier, collect the data, automate things, they're not actually making anything easier for you. They're just adding more work for you. So therefore, the return on investment and the convenience piece of it is working with someone, hiring someone to help you make sense of the information. So it's not the data collection that's the convenience. It's the making sense of the data that you are collecting that's the convenience.
Let's go back to your grocery store analogy, right? There's like what, 4 different kinds of shrimp you can buy. There's like whole shrimp. There is pre-cut easy peel shrimp. There is cooked shrimp, and then there's obviously dishes with shrimp in them. The difference between whole shrimp and easy peel shrimp is basically a large knife, right? That somebody's gone through and cut these things in a way that you can peel them a little more easily. That's some value. But if you can't cook, you've still bought $14 of something that is no good. So the equivalent there is, if we go in and we set up Google Analytics and you still can't use something useful out of the data, we've saved you a step, but you're still getting no value. As opposed to, here's some shrimp gumbo, or whatever else that Bubba listed in Forrest Gump. All the different shrimp dishes that you could possibly cook. That's where we all want to go. Is, what do I do? What should I be doing? Because to your point earlier, we are so overloaded and so overwhelmed every single day with all this stuff happening in marketing, in our jobs, in the world at large. What do you do? What should you do? One of the things that, like, I do I publish a weekday newsletter on the pandemic, and the thing I try to focus on is, okay, out of all of this news, what should I be doing differently than I am right now? Like, there's a piece last week on flying on airplanes. Like, make sure that the vent is pointing at your face full blast, because the air coming through the vents has already been filtered. So you want as much clean air on you as possible. Like, that's something I can do. And I feel like when we talk to our clients, when we hand them the punch list, this is what you need to do, they're a lot more grateful for that than saying, here's your new dashboards, good luck.
Yeah, no, and I think that that's one of the biggest mistakes that these agencies that are trying to be part of that convenience market are doing, is they're forgetting about the so what. Okay, so I'm giving you all of this information, great. So what? And that's actually the question, Chris, I ask you every single time you send me a report to review, is, so what? Why am I looking at this thing? Give me something actionable to do so that we can pass it off to our clients. And that's something
like
that we'll be actually doing for ourselves today.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's the reason why we called our live stream, which is every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern, So What? because the goal of making all of these tools work together and convenient for marketers is, so what? You have to be able to do something with the information that you have. And there is data overload. And, with, so Chris, in your example of the pandemic email that you send out every day and the data that you collect, I personally, I don't read it because it's overwhelming amount of information. And unless I have those very tangible things that I can do, I don't need to take in more information. And I don't plan on getting on a plane anytime soon. So for me, I'm the wrong audience because I'm not someone who can benefit from this additional amount of information. And I think that that's probably one of the things that happens when a company hires on a marketing analytics agency is they think, well, if I just have more data, then I can do more with it. And then it gets overwhelming and there's too much information. And then there's this disconnect of, well, you agency have brought us more information, but nothing has changed. If anything, we're just more confused. And the focus should be on that. So what? The what can I do? What is the action? And, when we go back to the original point of the conversation with this convenience market, when you have these companies that are working so hard to convince you that your life will be easier if you hire them, you'd better be true to what you're saying. My life had better be easier if I hire you. Don't make me work harder because I will let go of you immediately.
And you bring up a really good point there, because in the example of the shrimp, if you're a good chef, the pre-cut shrimp is probably the best middle ground, right? Because you can still see the quality of it. You can still see, was it's healthy or not and stuff like that. Where if it's pre-cooked, it's like, okay, who knows how long it was cooked, or how well it was cooked. But also, you don't want to be sitting with a knife cutting open 500 shrimp every night before service. So that's a case where you have someone who is skilled, who can take the output of, a time saving step and get real benefit of it. There are not that many people who are in that bucket. So for this convenience market, you have to decide what level of convenience matches up to the market that's out there. If you have somebody who is a trained data scientist, that convenience API could save them some time, right? Because they don't have to get their developers. If they're a developer themselves, they don't have to write the code themselves. But is it enough of a convenience that it's worth it? As opposed to, what's the next step in the process? And can you provide that, even though it will cost more? Because every step you take, the cost goes higher. It's like you can buy green whole coffee beans for like $4 a pound, really good ones. Then you got to roast them yourself, grind them yourself, turn them into coffee. And when you could just buy a cup of coffee from Starbucks, which is like maybe 15 beans total, right? And get the same outcome. Obviously, there are way more customers of Starbucks than there are customers of Sweet Maria's unroasted coffee beans, right? So for all of us in this industry, we have to think about, where is the market and who's going to pay for what level of convenience. If I make you a Google Data Studio dashboard and you never look at it, it's the same as not having it at all, right? You may as well have just spent it on, I don't know, cocaine and Netflix.
Sure. I don't even know how to respond to that one. I was thinking about this morning prior to us recording, and I feel like, so there's two sides of it. There's the companies providing the convenience, and then there's the companies who are buying the convenience. And so if you are the company buying the convenience, you probably fall into one of a couple of buckets. One is, I just want somebody else to get their hands dirty and do the thing so that I don't have to. The other is, I don't have time to do the thing. But then there's, what I was thinking about was sort of that smart delegation. I probably have people on my team who could do the thing, but is that the best use of their time? Therefore, can I bring in someone to do the thing alongside my team? And then, they can guide them, but my team can then focus on other things. So I think when you're evaluating this, these conveniences, Chris, to your point about cooking shrimp, what's that middle ground? And that's probably the sweet spot for both the service provider and the person buying the service is, give them enough so that they can do the thing themselves, but make sure that you're providing value for them. And fun fact, one of my first jobs was actually in a seafood restaurant. And so I can clean and peel shrimp very, very quickly. So for me, I'm always going to go for the completely unclean shrimp because I can do it myself very speedily. And I would even compete if I thought that that was a thing that would be worth my time.
There are competitions for that. So to wrap up, when you're evaluating vendors of any kind, you're looking at 4 factors: time, money, skill, and motivation. Do you have the time? Do you have the money? Do you have the skill? Do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Judge each vendor based on where you are, where they are, and find out where they can complement you rather than overlap or deliver mismatched services. And be careful. Do ask questions like, what is the ROI of this particular service? Sometimes you're going to find out the answer is not necessarily all that good. If you have follow-up questions for this, drop us a line. Go over to our Slack group. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. It's our free Slack group. There are 1,300 marketers discussing all sorts of analytics and data questions and the occasional funny joke. Very occasional. And if you haven't already subscribed to our show, please go to trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and subscribe today. Thanks for watching. Want help solving your company's data analytics and digital marketing problems? Visit trustinsights.ai today and let us know how we can help you.